Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar, the Integration Pilot Programs in Unmanned Aircraft Systems. My name is Nilu Parvin-Ashtiani and I will help facilitate today's webinar. So today's webinar is hosted by the National Operations Center of Excellence, or NOCO. At NOCO, we support the transportation system management and operations community. So if you'd like to connect with us or just know what we're all about, feel free to browse our Knowledge Center on our website or our YouTube channel where we share all of our previous webinar recordings. So those links can be found on the bottom left side of your screen right now in the useful links box. Also in there we've shared how you can subscribe to our bi-weekly newsletter for major TISMO announcements and upcoming webinar information, and also a link to our Twitter account for information. So now I'll cover a few logistics for today's webinar. This webinar is being recorded, and the recording along with the presentation slide will be shared with you through the NOCO website. All the phones of the attendees are on listen-only mode by default, but we'd like to stay engaged by using the question discussion pod that we have on the screen right now. So put in any questions that you have anytime during the webinar, and at the end of the webinar, we'll read each of those questions one at a time, and our presenters will answer those questions. So that's all I had for the logistics, and with that, I would like to hand it over to Shane Gill, our webinar moderator for today, to start us off with the webinar. Shane?
Hey, Nilu. Thank you so much. And I'm here at AASHTO with my colleague, Caroline Keltica. We're in the Policy and Government Relations Division here at AASHTO, and I'm Program Manager for Multimodal Transportation. And AASHTO, about 6 months ago, established a UAV drone user work group, and we had our first kind of charge from our AASHTO's board of directors, and they asked for the Council on Aviation, committees on maintenance, operations, bridges and structures, environment and sustainability, transportation and communications, and our Council on Highways and Streets to coordinate drone policy and activity among the state DOTs. And so through a domestic scan program, we, with work through the NCHRP, we conducted our first webinar back November 29th and heard from Michigan DOT, Alaska DOT-F, and North Carolina DOT. And this is the second in that series. A lot of questions were raised, and we wanted to have a webinar that specifically focused on the 3 state DOTs that were selected to be a part of FAA's Integration Pilot Program. And so on this webinar, we will hear from North Carolina DOT, North Dakota DOT, and Kansas DOT. But before I kind of give an introduction of the speakers, I did want to introduce one of my colleagues who is with AASHTO Communications and the Transportation TV. I'm sure most of you have seen a lot of his pieces, but he does have an upcoming segment that he wants to share with you. So I'll turn it over to Tony Dorsey.
Thanks, Shane. Hello, everybody. Once again, my name is Tony Dorsey, and I'm the Media Relations Manager for AASHTO. And before I forget to let all of you know how to reach me, I want you to know that my email address is tdorsey@aashto.org. And my cell phone, you can just call me on my cell if you need to get a hold of me if you have any questions about the process moving forward, 202-412-2391. So as Shane alluded to, we are this spring going to undertake what I like to call, just simply put, Drones 3. This will be the 3rd time that AASHTO Communications has done a survey of our state departments of transportation through their communications offices at the DOT to find out how many states are using drones. This drone project also involves a special report video that we write and produce in-house. So we've done 2 of these special report videos already, along with an infographic and a press release that we send out to the news media to promote our findings. And we've had a lot of success getting the word out about how states are doing and how they're using drones. Of course, the main objective of all of this is messaging. I mean, so it's our mission to demonstrate how state DOTs have become innovation agencies, how they are leading the way when it comes to transformational technologies. Last year, during what we will call Drones 2, our survey found that 20 state DOTs had incorporated drones into their daily operations. That means they were using them for surveying, public education and outreach, traffic control and monitoring, as well as bridge and other types of inspections. Another 15 state DOTs last year reported that they were in the research phase, testing drones to determine how they could be utilized. So a total of 35 states were deploying drones or researching them very, very seriously last year. Now, if you look back to our first survey in 2016, we found just 16 states were taking a look at drones. No state had deployed them seriously, and some were working on creating drone policies, or they were conducting some sort of a research program. So we've gone from 16 states just looking at drones in 2016 to 20 states deploying them just 2 years later, and 15 additional states doing some serious research. So from the 16 states in 2016 to 35 just 2 years later. That's a pretty incredible leap forward. We will conduct this same survey in 2019 to see how that number has changed. Our focus will be on 2 areas. We're going to explore the FAA's Drone Integration Pilot Program, the focus of today's webinar. And as you know, North Carolina DOT and Kansas DOT are a big part of that. And at TRB, we were fortunate enough to interview both Basil Yap from NCDOT and Lindsay Dreiling from Kansas DOT about their program. So those 2 interviews are already in the can. And we also interviewed Fred Judson from the Ohio DOT about their program there. We also plan to explore in Drones 3 how state DOTs are using drones as a tool in their response to major emergencies and disasters. We're going to once again rely on all of you for your support over the next few months as we send out the survey questions. I know you'll probably be answering some of these questions given the fact that your communications departments will be reaching out to you. So I want to thank you in advance for all of your help. That's all I've got to report at this particular time, and unless you have any questions, let me turn it back over to Shane. Shane?
Great. Thanks, Tony, and we look forward to seeing those presentations and publications and communications moving forward. So let me go ahead and introduce you to our first speaker. Many of the folks on this call do know Basil Yap, the UAS Program Manager with the North Carolina Department of Transportation's Division of Aviation. Basil is the primary contact with the legislature to implement regulations regarding the ownership and operation of UAS systems in North Carolina, in addition to liaison with the FAA's UAS Integration Office, local FAA FSDO office, and statewide ATC facilities on behalf of the UAS program. Basil and his team at North Carolina design, establish, and conduct studies and make recommendations relative to the UAS policies, programs, methods, and procedures currently in place, in addition with other governmental teams to ensure the organization's engineering support structure is driving the business forward with minimal expenditures. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Basil to talk about the UAS Integration Pilot Program with the North Carolina DOT.
Thank you again for allowing us to speak on behalf of North Carolina about what we're doing within the Integration Pilot Program, and excited also to hear from our other DOT partners. So just have a quick presentation put together here to give kind of a high-level overview of what we're doing within North Carolina, and be glad to answer any questions that you may have on specifics as well. So I think it's important to look at aviation, really the timeline of aviation, understanding where we are, because of course looking forward is key. And so right now, 2018, we're seeing medical package delivery in our state, and as we look forward, though, we're thinking of kind of urban air mobility or these more advanced UAS operations that we'll begin to see. And so what we're doing now is really laying the foundation, both regulatory and operational, for the future of the full potential of drones or unmanned aircraft systems. A quick kind of overview of what the UAS Integration Pilot Program is. This was established through a presidential memorandum back in October of 2017. It's a 3-year program. The winners or the selectees were announced back in May of 2018. And so right now in January of 2019, we're almost halfway through this program. So it's moving quickly, but the purpose was to really kind of test and evaluate how state, local, and tribal governments can help with future regulations and what role they will play. And so, DOTs are a perfect model for that because we are all things transportation, and so we think long-term strategic planning of our transportation systems. We think about our current projects that we have in the pipeline and new roads, new airports, new rail corridors, and then we think about the maintenance of them as well. And so, naturally, this would just be another addition to our portfolio of transportation. Also, we were encouraged to partner with industry to develop and test a new concept of operations, and we'll talk a little bit about what North Carolina is doing the next couple slides. And then really, all this is producing data which is going to inform future federal regulatory and regulatory decisions, and we'll see that with flights over people, beyond line of sight, etc. So there were 10 selectees. I believe the number that got through to the final round was 149, around 150 folks, and from all over the nation, but there were 10 that were selected. Fortunate that North Carolina was selected along with 2 other departments of transportation, as noted before, North Dakota and Kansas. But we had a tribal government, Choctaw Nation. We had a university, University of Alaska. Then we had an airport authority, Memphis Shelby, and then other various groups as well at the city and local level. And so North Carolina, our focus was really on 3 things. Medical package delivery, food package delivery, and then transportation infrastructure inspection. And because, of course, we had a diversity of topography and population, we could test this in rural, suburban, and urban areas, in the mountains of North Carolina all the way to the coast, sandy beaches. And so we put together a small team of participants, industry partners, and really kind of focused on those 3 areas as we noted. So our industry partners include Apple, AirMap, Flytrex, Fordham, Matternet, and others you can see there. WakeMed is a healthcare or hospital and health system in North Carolina. We partner with some local governments, RDU Airport, Raleigh-Durham Airport, as well as the town of Holly Springs, and then we had a university partner, North Carolina State University. And so this is our team that we have in place. We may add folks as we move forward, depending on our core team members' needs right here, but really the big package delivery folks we'll get into here in a second. So we're fortunate to partner with Zipline. They're a company operating, they're a U.S.-based company, but operating over in Rwanda, and their focus is going to be medical package delivery in rural North Carolina. And so they've had great success in Rwanda. You can see some statistics there. But at the end of the day, what they did is provide on-demand delivery for blood products. And by doing that, they're able to reduce the amount of blood products that would need to be stored on hand, so in inventory, and then they're able to efficiently move these blood products out to these outlying clinics, which reduce waste down to 0. And so they fly a fixed-wing platform, and they drop out of the bottom of their platform what the gentleman's holding. It's a one-time only use parachute and cardboard box there, and the blood products in that, it keeps cold chain custody. And so what they're doing is they're cutting down the 7 to 8 hour drive in Rwanda down to really 30 to an hour long flight. And so you see there it has a 50-mile operational radius. And so we think of Rwanda and then we think of North Carolina, and we may say, well, there's a big difference there, but really medical needs in our rural community is a big concern. How do we access either the disadvantaged or elderly? And so by moving products to these outlying clinics, there's a great business case there. So we're really excited about this partnership. Our next partner is Matternet, and they're focused on our urban medical package delivery. And so they're a U.S.-based company operating currently in Switzerland. And so their focus is using a drone to collect a lab sample at a clinic. So say you go for a checkup, or maybe a physical, you get labs drawn. And normally those would sit at that clinic until a ground courier came through, picked that up, then took it to the main laboratory. And so Matternet has partnered with WakeMed, which is a hospital system in Raleigh, which is our capital here in North Carolina. And so they have already started flights and plan to continue to operate a network of flying specimens from outlying clinics to their main laboratory. And so you can see that this is a quadcopter, and the range is a little bit more limited. You can see it's about a 12-mile range right here. The last zip line was a 50-mile radius. So we can see, two different models here. So another partner, Flytrex, focused on food package delivery. And so this is exciting because really, if you are anywhere in our area, you could come to North Carolina and download this app and go to the town of Holly Springs and actually participate. You could get food delivered. And so what their first operations will be from a local shopping center, serving a variety of restaurants there, and then flying to known locations throughout the town. And their first location that's planned is a recreational park. So say I'm there watching my daughter play soccer, I'd like to order some food. I can put that order over an app, and next thing you know, the drone will come to a predetermined spot in the parking lot and drop my package down there. And so you see the photo on the left-hand side. That's a package, the food's in there, and it's being lowered by a rope. So what happens is the drone comes down, hovers, and then lowers it in to a designated area. And so they've had success with this in Iceland, Panama, and Costa Rica, and so we're excited to see this here in our state as well. And then last but not least, the focus of transportation infrastructure inspection, one of the most exciting partners, of course, on this North Carolina DOT. And so we're focused on all modes of transportation. How can we use drones to monitor them with beyond visual line of sight operations and operations over people? And so we've had a drone program since 2014. We now fly 31 drones within our department for a variety of missions. And example of those missions would be airport inspection, bridge inspection, construction project monitoring. We had some recent landslides that we've flown in the western part of the state, looking at rail corridors, and then traffic monitoring as well. And so this will be, the last of those three concept of operations that I mentioned earlier. Again, great benefits that we highlighted and will continue to highlight about how we can use drones. These benefits here are really kind of focused on the benefit to the state and the consumer, and then how we're really helping the industry progress along. We want to make sure that we are, we're helping innovation happen within aviation, and we want to make sure we're doing it safely. This is a quick overview of our planned North Carolina operations. Kind of give you highlight the urban example we have on the left side is within Raleigh, and so there are some outlying clinics that will be flying to their centrally located laboratory, which is attached to their hospital. And so we think about blood specimens being flown from an outlying clinic to the lab, and then there's the potential for that leg back that we could be putting in high-value pharmaceuticals or other medical supplies. The typical weight limit that we're seeing on these is around 5 pounds, so they're able to deliver 5 pounds worth of products. On the right-hand side, you see the rural example. Now, again, this is a model of eastern North Carolina. Zipline is working through the final logistics on their exact location they'll be flying. But this illustrates eastern North Carolina flying out to different clinics in the eastern part of the state delivering blood. And so we're excited that Zipline has partnered with the Blood Connection, which is a blood provider that provides those products to our hospitals and clinics throughout the state. And so they'll be now partnering with them, providing those to a rural hospital system. So I put together this kind of this quick sketch of how we do route planning right now, because I think it's important to understand that really, DOTs, I feel, are a perfect fit for this, moving forward, how we interact with drones in building this ecosystem. And so that green star you see there is WakeMed and their centrally located laboratory. This is an outlying clinic in Garner, North Carolina. And so we first look at connectivity. We want to make sure that the drone is able to connect, and the drones that we're flying are connected over the cellular network. So we want to make sure we have good network coverage that whole route. And then, of course, we don't want to be hitting any of those towers either on the flight path. Again, most of our operations are going to be 400 feet and lower above ground. And so we want to look at, schools, what is the population density? Are there any areas of sensitivity? Like we probably don't want to fly over a prison. That could be confusing to the guards. And so there are, different impacts that we want to factor into that route as well. So we would choose a route. We would minimize how many times that we cross over traffic, because flights over people do include flights over moving vehicles. And so we can, we want to choose a route that capitalizes on unpopulated areas or sparsely populated areas and minimize, crossing over traffic and that exposure there. And so, looking at that, we also then factor in, so that's ground traffic, we factor in air traffic. And so we can look at historical radar data of where our aircraft are flying, and we can factor that in. And so we have taken data over the last few years and gone through it, segregated it out to flights below 1,000 feet and then 500 feet and lower. WakeMed, the hospital, actually has a helipad, so there's a lot of helicopter traffic that goes in there. So we want to make sure we choose a route that wouldn't interfere with their normal approach and exit path, departure paths. And then there's a state highway patrol and news helicopter pad as well. And so we want to make sure we're communicating with them. And so then if that's not enough, so we can adjust time of flights, we can adjust altitude of flight, then we throw in weather, of course. And so weather, of course, plays a factor. You want to avoid certain conditions, but you also want to use it to your benefit. So if the wind is blowing one direction, we know that's going to improve our efficiency. But most of these routes we have are already predetermined. So the weather factor would mostly be a go or no-go. So anyhow, this is kind of a quick overview, a lot of different applications that you would see in route planning for ground transportation you can see can be applied to the highways of the sky, so to speak. So just quickly, we'll talk about when we got started. In August 29th, it was our first flight under the program, medical package delivery. We were flying, the waiver we had was over people and delivering from a surgical center to the main laboratory at WakeMed. And so testing quite a few different things like remote ID. We had a UTM, or airspace management tool, set up, and so some great success there. I'll just quickly mention, when we talk about transportation infrastructure inspection, Hurricane Florence, because this was one of our success stories as well. We're able to mobilize after Hurricane Florence and fly over 260 missions, captured over 8,000 videos and photos, and we're able to coordinate this successfully with the FAA and local authorities. And so at that time, we got emergency COA for beyond visual line of sight flights, and so able to kind of use that data as well under the IPP to support FAA and DOT as they're going through rulemaking. So the last couple slides here, I want to talk about Unmanned Traffic Management System. We partner with AirMap, and this is a key part of flying beyond visual line of sight, is knowing where other aircraft are, manned aircraft as well as unmanned aircraft. And so we've partnered with AirMap, and this particular dashboard you see here was used during our Hurricane Florence response. We bring in our radar data that's provided by the FAA to show where manned traffic is, and then all of the participating drones would show up on this as well. And so this is pretty exciting because we have a full picture of what's happening in the sky, and so we can communicate with our drone pilots to help deconflict if necessary. Community engagement is a big part of this. What is the community's feedback? Are they excited about drones flying over their neighborhoods or in their communities? And so DOTs, as you know, already play a great role in this because we do this already during the NEPA process when we're building new roads or airports or other transportation structures. We go out, we have community meetings, and so we're doing the same thing here in North Carolina under this drone program, getting their engagement. And so lots of positive feedback that we've got, but we know that there's going to be some negative feedback, and we just want to make sure we're getting that information and hearing those concerns and then incorporating it into how we're proceeding. And so this is my last slide here. Again, as I started off with, it's important to understand where we are in this evolution of aviation and the role. And so one of the big buzzwords moving forward is urban air mobility when we're flying air taxis in our urban areas. And there were some recent studies, market studies by NASA, and so there were certainly focuses that were brought out in those studies, like infrastructure inspection is a great use for drones, medical package delivery, routine food and parcel package delivery. We think of the Amazon example. And so we're excited that we're already focused on that, but there are some other areas that we would like to build on our success from IPP, and that's autonomous ambulatory services using some of these air taxi systems as well as single pilot cargo aircraft, and really kind of hitting that sweet spot of unmanned cargo aircraft where it's above 55 pounds, but it's smaller than our commuter aircraft as well. And so all of this functions within this unmanned traffic management system. And so, again, I feel that really DOTs are going to play an important role as we begin to see this evolution throughout our state, or throughout our country. And so that's all for me, and I think I'll take a question.
So this is Shane. Yeah, so a couple of questions have popped up in the chat box, and I did want to let Mike Luce know that Bob Brock with Kansas DOT is coming up as our third speaker. The FAA, that is one of the areas that they presented them to work on, and so I think that he will answer your first question there in his presentation. But I did want to ask you, Basil, did you guys apply for the COA before or after or during the emergency, and how long did it take you to receive that COA?
So we got a COA in place, a government jurisdictional COA in place for NCDOT long before the hurricane. We did that back, I think, in 2000, maybe even 2017. And so we had a COA in place. And then during the event, we were on the phone with FAA, and they were able to turn those requests around very quickly. There were a couple times that we were denied because there was just a lot of helicopter operations in that area, and we understood. But typically, we got approvals within 12 to 24 hours for those emergency COAs. Yep.
Thank you. And a next question, did FEMA reimburse the North Carolina DOT for expenses for using the UAS during the inspections of the damage from Hurricane Florence?
Yes, that was, it's my understanding that we did have some on-call contractors that were assisting us as well as internal teams, and those that was covered by funds that FEMA provided for the response.
Great. And I did want to let folks know that, yes, the recording is being, the webinar is being recorded and will be posted to our website. That's Council on Aviation at AASHTO's website. And we will also, I believe, Nilu, be able to capture a lot of these questions that are being asked as well, which can be posted. Let's do a couple more questions, and I want to move on to our other speakers, and then we'll do a round-robin set of questions at the end. But a question for you, does your COA cover all operations across the entire agency, or is it just in your specific division? Maybe that was a question from Eric.
Yep. So our COA we put in place was only for emergencies. And so normally actually I take that back. The COA we have in place was set up for emergencies and for some unique operations we're doing where we're using a drone to spray an herbicide on North Carolina DOT right away. In that case, we had to have a COA because we had a crop duster, and so we fell under different rules, and we couldn't fly under Part 107 to disperse an herbicide. Normally, we're operating under Part 107, which is a little bit more straightforward. So most of our operations are under that.
And Basil, could you, and we'll move on, let me ask you just a general question. What types of drones are you guys using mostly? Yes,
so most of them are quadcopters. We have 31 or 30, around over 30 drones right now. Most of them are quadcopters. We do have 2 fixed-wing platforms that we use. And, Unique or DJI is most of the quadcopter manufacturers, and then we have a SenseFly EB, which is our fixed-wing platform.
Great. Thanks. And so for folks that are kind of queued up in the questions, we'll get those. I think that some of these questions will be answered by our next 2 speakers. So I did want to go ahead and move on to Russ, but Basil will be available, as will the other speakers, at the end to kind of do some round robins with you guys on these questions. But I'd like to go ahead and introduce our next speaker. Russ Bokeltz is the Strategy and Innovation Director of Transportation Systems for the North Carolina Department of Transportation in Bismarck, overseeing strategic and IT operations for the department since 2007. Russ currently serves as the Vice Chair for the National Transportation Committee on Transportation Systems Operations for AASHTO, the National Transportation Representative FirstNet Public Safety Advisory Committee, and as a member of the National Academy's Transportation Research Board concerning cybersecurity for intelligent transportation systems. In addition to his current assignment, Russ was chosen as North Dakota DOT's Program Administrator for the North Dakota U.S. DOT FAA Integrated Pilot Program for Unmanned Aerial Systems. So with that, Russ, I'll turn it over to you for your presentation.
Okay, thanks, Shane. And we are the North Dakota DOT, not North Carolina, but I would like to be there today because the temperature is a lot nicer over there. So, but anyways, appreciate the invite here, and I guess we'll kind of go on.
Bob, if you're talking, we cannot hear you on the phone. There's Russ. Russ. There is an issue with the phone. If you can hear me, if you could just redial the number. So, folks, we are having a technical issue with the sound, so let's just give it a minute until we resolve this issue. So thanks for your patience while Ross is redialing. If that's okay with you, Shane, why don't we go ahead and get to Bob's presentation and we'll come back to Ross.
Hey, good morning, everyone. We'll double check and see if we can jump in here. This is Bob Brock from Kansas. While we're getting our comms remedied, we'll jump right into my presentation and make use of your time. Just a heads up, we do, for everyone's situational awareness, we have 131 attendees today, which is very exciting. It wasn't that many years ago that there were only about 20 people would show up to an event like this, and that would have been a major conference. So pretty exciting. Right now, the integration pilot program for the state of Kansas is an interesting opportunity, and frankly, we're deeply honored to participate as we have a brand new governor for the state of Kansas and a brand new Secretary of Transportation. It's been an exciting period as all of us work together to advance both safety for the organization and also each of the agencies across the state as we work together to advance some of the safety for the citizens of Kansas and also promote the economic development that we all are excited to develop. I'll do a very quick overview. One of the things that makes Kansas unique in this field is the rich aviation history that we all enjoy. However, in Kansas, it is a lifeblood for our citizens and for our economy. So it's very critical that we actually engage this in a smart and safe way, because general aviation today, if you go to any general aviation airport and look at the small aircraft on the ramp, you'll count 3 out of 4 aircraft in the world are produced in Kansas. So we can't afford there to be anything other than full and complete integration of UAS into this greater system. Today in Kansas, we employ a little over 91,000 people for the sole purpose of building aviation and aviation devices. That comes out to about $20 billion here. So what that translates to the UAS community is the ability to partner in a big way. If there's anything I can compliment this program for at the national level, is that when the call came out from the presidential memorandum to all of the states, tribes, and municipalities, one of the primary focus areas was partnering at a strategic level between state, university, and industry. That has proven to be incredibly beneficial to this program. When we were selected as one of the 10 recipients, it was very exciting. If we had time, I would take you through the people that are in this picture, because it's representative of a vast number of organizations, as well as just raw numbers of people. But from economic development to senior leaders and senior legislators to universities, multiple universities are involved in the UAS program at the national level from Kansas. Basil did a tremendous job, and it's fun to share the stage with both Russ and Basil, because they're both exceptional speakers and incredibly knowledgeable about this industry. One thing we've not talked about yet is that when the call came out about 15 months ago to apply for this program, over 2,800 interested parties raised their hand to get behind those 149 applications that Basil talked about. That is reasonably unprecedented and demonstrates the hunger and the enthusiasm across the country for these capabilities. We're all aware of the IPP Presidential Memorandum. I won't spend a lot of time with that, but the big picture is it really has begun at the highest levels of leadership in our country and trickled down to what we believe are one of the innovation agencies for transportation is a beautiful way to describe that. And I appreciate those words, Tony. We will absolutely use that in our own promotion materials. Our objectives for IPP in the state of Kansas are to establish safe, smart processes, to advance the FAA program, and to position Kansas as a UAS leader in a similar way to the way we're currently positioned as an aviation leader in general. We believe we have a unique responsibility within the general aviation community to be good stewards of our airspace and be good stewards of the industry in general. Two major focuses were given to us by the FAA. Like many, we applied with 10 or 15 major efforts we would like to look into, and we'll do that eventually. But today, Kansas is heavily focused on precision agriculture and long-line linear infrastructure inspection. As we look at those and as we talk to transportation professionals across the country, it is critical that we get these capabilities fielded as quickly as possible because we believe we can save a great deal of money for every transportation professional involved in these highways, railroads. Long linear infrastructure inspections are a critical component. But in addition to saving money, we believe that the effectiveness that can be gained from drones in this space will drastically and fantastically improve where we are and where we're going and how we accomplish these inspections. At the end of the day, it is a White House memorandum that inspired this program. However, it is still a U.S. Department of Transportation effort, and our responsibility in IPP is to gather solid, demonstrable data that the entire U.S. DOT can use to include FHWA, FAA, and all the rest that have a vested interest. So, of course, this does not supersede existing procedure for establishing and certifying credible bridge inspections or any of the rest of the inspections that are already in place. However, it will inform future rulemaking, and we look forward to advancing the industry from that standpoint. Our program overview for the state of Kansas is in 3 phases. I will tell you that they are the beyond visual line of sight, nighttime operations, and a great deal of the other complex environments all share the same themes from phase 1 to phase 2 to phase 3. Our phase 1 will be conducting advanced UAS operations in an environment that is incredibly benign. And we want to stress safety above all else, and that we protect those, every player, to include the citizens on the ground and people that are in the air sharing the airspace. So that's an incredibly important part, and we will not move off of phase 1 until every milestone to mitigate risk is achieved to both our satisfaction and the FAA satisfaction. And then we'll continue to get more complex from there. Key highlights as we look at some of these activities. We all are aware of the beyond visual line of sight issues and the opportunity that lies there. We also believe that as we look at sensors and payload integration and systems integration, systems engineering, we're going to get a great deal out of night operations that are less, that involve less people. And the population is no longer as part of that mix because they may or may not even be participating in air or ground. Our first flight for our inaugural flight was exciting. Again, each one of our pictures has a consistent theme, and because that is the theme of the entire program, is deep and abiding partnership across multiple agencies. We have 31 partners in the state of Kansas program, and because of that, we have a footprint that enables expertise that is unique and also brings a great deal of equities to the table. And in this case, I'd like to compliment the FAA. 3 of the people in this picture are actually FAA headquarters people from multiple lines of business across the entire agency. So that's an unusual and unprecedented level of effort and expertise that we're enjoying in this program. Our flight time overview right now includes about 49 sorties. We have about 400 miles flown, and the reason that our numbers are incredibly focused is that we have only done beyond visual line of sight operations. And to have flown 400 miles with that kind of a process as a civilian-based Department of Transportation has become a big success milestone. So we're very pleased with that. L3I2 is just a short way to say long line linear infrastructure inspection, but we're also working on precision agriculture. And for those of you that have interest in precision agriculture, we're more than happy to discuss offline, but for the purpose of today's conversation, we're looking at how do we reduce cost, reduce time, increase safety for the personnel from transportation that we invest in these operations, and how do we move forward. Program challenges, every program is going to have them. We're not surprised by that. So as we take a look at how this has gone, it is a tremendous challenge and an opportunity to excel to have this many people have this much of a voice in this critical of an operation. So as we work with industry and state and university cultures, it is a unique challenge to bring investment to the table in time, expertise, and actual just raw funding. But that's a challenge. That's not a barrier. So it's become an opportunity for us to find common ground and get things moving forward. Lessons learned as we process through this, where we describe this process as building the airplane as we fly it. It is going to require us to get out ahead of the process and the bureaucracy to demonstrate capabilities and then come back. So it is a 2 steps forward, 1 step back process, and that's not unusual in a systems integration activity. Absolutely, I've touched on safety multiple times, and I've talked about partnerships. Building an ecosystem that allows us to meet the goals of the FAA, the goals of the citizens involved, and those 31 mission partners, and promoting industry in a powerful way is about the very best thing we think we can do with this program. The future's bright as we move forward with this. We're nothing but excited. We are absolutely involved in infrastructure inspection, but we have about an 8-page list of other things we're going to be doing shortly. So we're excited to move forward, and we thank you for your time today.
Great, thank you. And I'll ask that Russ's slides be brought back up so he can start over on those, and then we'll answer some additional questions from you guys at the end. Hey, go ahead, Russ.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
All right. So I want to move over to basically we're talking about the state law where we are not allowed to have a purchase aircraft, at least as far as state agencies. So right now there's a current bill out there that hopefully it's basically just a word change where it says manned aircraft so we can purchase UASs. Currently in the state we are contracting with professionals that are going through our engineering services, so we are using the drone services. We don't own anything right now. So as far as North Dakota, and I know Bob mentioned as far as the missions, so we had submitted actually quite a few as well, and FAA pretty much picked out 2 of them for us, and our efforts are focused on basically media and emergency response as well as the linear infrastructure, as you can see on there. As far as our partners, that was key, and we're one of the fortunate states to have a UAS test site in our state. So we have Northern Plains UAS test site on Grand Forks that we leverage heavily on and rely on them as well. Then on some of the big hitters as far as our partners, we do have tribal, we do have other state entities, but we have CNN, XL Energy, Harris Corporation, Botlink, Apario, as well as Parazero. So those are kind of the major players that are helping us accomplish these missions. So as far as Mission 1, this took place we did basically our shakedown in August, and then in the end of September, where else you, as far as want to do operations over people. So we are looking for an outdoor group setting, and we chose the NDSU, so North Dakota State Bison, and by the way, who are the state champions again this year in FCS football. We chose their tailgating events when they played South Dakota State, where there were thousands of people, gathered before each home game. So with this, there were requirements. We had required power as well as Ethernet connectivity, because the video that was basically being filmed by CNN was basically being sent back to Atlanta to their CNN headquarters, and then it was sent to their affiliates. So we were doing live, basically, shots of this, and you can see what they were using. CNN was using it's called the Snap by Vantage Robotics. It's a very light aircraft, 1.37 pounds. And as far as the risk mitigation with this, since it was so light, there was no need for anything such as a parachute or anything like that. And they had the operations over people waiver already in place, so we didn't have to do that as well. So it was a fairly cold day. The wind was, I guess, cooperating. We did have them up on a canopy, so they were out of the way as far as with I'll say the people at the tailgating event. A lot of people we'd had to do is, and Basil mentioned this as well, is the community engagement. We had a little, the public know that, first of all, we were flying in a Class D airspace, meaning we were right beside the airport. The other thing is that we had to let them know that we weren't spying on them or anything like that. So what we did is met with NDSU, met with a lot of people, had a lot of newscasts out there. And what we did is a few things that we accomplished. So we did have two flying UASs flying in a sustained environment in the Class D airspace. And also Parazero was the first one as far as their parachute was approved for the DJI Phantom 4 Pro. And now this was, you can see it's a 3.47 pound aircraft, so it did require the parachute, which can deploy at 9 meters or above and still be safe to land. So that's the kind of aspect of that. So if you need any more information on that, I can give you some more information. But the event went very well. We did have a lot of first in those things, and then we also were just featured in the Association for Unmanned Vehicle Systems International, which is the AUVSI magazine that this came out for this month. So as far as Mission 2, this is one we're currently working on extensively, except with the shutdown kind of is slowing us down a little bit, but due to the weather, it's okay. So what we want to do is go beyond visual line of sight, basically linear infrastructure inspection in an urban area. So right now we're working with XL Energy. They're a heavy player as long as Harris Corporation. So we want to do this where we can conduct it either day or night. Concerns are, operations over moving vehicles, which we're working on with FAA, as far as, what signifies a catastrophic event, should it crash and land or create a chain reaction of vehicles. So we're working with that. But the intention with this is not to fly with a parachute because of the drift factor, especially when you're in the urban area, the unforeseen circumstances and those things. So the intent is, again, not to fly with a parachute. So with that, we were able to leverage the PSP, which stands for the Partnership for Safety Program. Excel Energy is on that program as well, and so we're leveraging them. So we were over in Plattsville, Colorado, in a different state, and we were doing going beyond visual line of sight. And then you can see beforehand was with ORC 2, and now we're using a Vapor 55. And so right now the missions they're continuing doing those, and we're taking advantage of that data. So our next step, what we're looking at is moving into Grand Forks, North Dakota, where we'll be flying in an urban environment, inspecting transmission lines. So the other initiative, what we're looking at doing is the state has, or actually our governor has pushed out, is a $30 million project where we're talking about unmanned traffic management, UTM, for the whole state. So you can do the detect and avoid in a ground-based system, and where you can identify the friend or foe and with remote ID. So we know that's kind of moving toward the future. Again, and the other thing is with that, possibly establishing corridors for I'll say flying machines or that aviation aspect of it. So with that kind of concludes my briefing.
Great. Thanks, Russ. And again, apologies for some audio difficulties there. I do want to go ahead and open up for some additional questions. I see that Bob has answered a couple of his questions that queued up after his presentation. But Bob, let me, there was a question on, you had some really impressive pictures of drones that you guys are using. What is an average cost of some of these? And maybe all three of our speakers could talk to some of their most used equipment, pieces of equipment, and the cost, and maybe even some federal funding sources that you've used to be able to purchase.
I don't know if Bob's muted, but as far as cost, some of the aircraft that we're using roughly run in the $300,000 to $400,000 range because of the equipment that's on there.
And Russ, just a question. So, any types of federal funding that you've used to purchase this equipment?
Again, we're not allowed to purchase, but we are looking at that. There are some funds available, some grant dollars, but right now we basically is contracted. Our stuff has been contracted out. And
Basil, are you? I think you may be hopefully have been unmuted as well. Could you answer the same?
Sure. Anywhere from $1,500 for a DJI Phantom 4, on up. Not quite at $300,000, but we're in the $40,000 range. So that's through the different quadcopters with all the different sensors on it. Usually the sensors are what drive the cost up. So yeah, and our funding comes internal from DOT. There was no funding attached with our participation in the IPP, so we didn't get any money from the FAA. This is our investment into the program. And then for us, the UAS program is funded with all state funds as well.
That's the same for North Dakota as well as far as funding. It's pretty much out of Hyde.
That's exactly the same for Kansas as well. We have not purchased aircraft for the state per se, but our mission partners currently provide assets and payloads, and we share the observation that the payload is by far the driver for cost.
Thank you. And I see, Bob, that you answered, but maybe just for the recording's sake, the question that was raised regarding the L312 program.
Yes, the I get this question a lot in transportation audiences about what costs do we expect to save when it comes to infrastructure inspection. And the answer is we don't know. There's best guesses from a number of studies that are out there, but one of the chief benefits of this entire program is the ability for us to actually test all the industry numbers by doing flights and having a baseline that really does give an economic impact. But I would actually steer anyone that wants to discuss cost. I would also say stand by on that conversation until we identify what are those critical new capabilities we haven't tried to do yet, and the ability to not have to use a snooper truck ever again to get underneath of a bridge, and to not have to stop traffic to do mishap scene recreation. There's a tremendous amount of value there that is very different than cost.
Great, thanks. And I do know that some folks are asking questions about other uses, such as like West Virginia talked about them actually using for surveying and mapping. And just so let folks know that on the call, we will be having additional webinars where we're going to be highlighting various aspects of using UAS and drones. And if you have any suggestions of folks that we can survey and have them present on various topics, please let us know. Any additional questions? Go ahead and type them into the chat box. And I think that, so this question, I'm going to look at you, Basil. You did talk about community engagement. And so we have a question, what, if any, pushback has occurred from the public from the various UAS applications that were involved in the study?
So it was, we were excited about doing medical package delivery because we knew that that would be a really easy sell to the public, and it has been. And maybe I shouldn't use the word easy because there's tremendous benefit to using drones for medical package delivery. And so a lot of our, as I noted during the presentation, most of our interaction has been positive. The concerns folks have is privacy. Is the camera on board recording? Where is that recording stored? Who has access to that? And we're fortunate that most of the platforms we're using, like Matternet and Zipline, don't actually have a camera on board. There's no camera, so that helps alleviate that conversation. And we can point to our privacy policy, which is required under our memorandum of agreement with the FAA for our participation on this pilot program. But I do feel like we need, at least North Carolina needs to do a better job of engaging those that are going to have negative feedback and try to really hear their concerns. But unfortunately, our outreach efforts to date have not yielded too many negative responses.
Great, and I see that we have a couple of people that like they're typing in questions. So go ahead. We do have a few more minutes, but I did want to thank Bob for jumping in when we were having some technical difficulties there, and I didn't get an opportunity to introduce him. But Bob Brock is Director of Aviation, Director of UAS with Kansas DOT. He joined the Kansas DOT after 22 years in the Air Force. And what I really am impressed is not only is an instrument-rated commercial fixed-wing and helicopter instructor pilot, but he later commanded the largest UAS squadron in the Air Force. So I wanted to give Bob an introduction. I know that most people on this call do know him as well. But I also wanted to say thanks, Bob, for your service. And any other questions, type them in. So we do have a couple of requests for bridge inspection webinars in the future, and definitely that will be on our list. And again, I do know that all of this webinar, including the technical difficulties, will be recorded, and we will be posting the questions. So if we haven't answered your specific question, we will be sending these out and get those answered for you. And then, as Tony Dorsey mentioned, within the state DOTs, your public information officers, communications team will be getting a survey relating to your use of UAS and this new technology. And the question, so I see Colin, so I just want to say hi to Colin, who also served on this domestic scan with me. Are any of you guys utilizing thermal for civil infrastructure inspections besides concrete bridge uses? They'd be interested, or Jason would be interested in hearing about it. And then I think this was for maybe Bob. Is there an estimated date on when beyond visual line of sight flights will be authorized for DOT operations?
We're currently authorized to do BVLOS flights as part of IPP. The question mark is when will it be operationally usable nationwide? I will tell you that in order to execute a BVLOS flight, even with our current waivers, there are 35 provisions that have to be satisfied for each flight. And we're slowly working through those to give people an opportunity to figure out how to remove those obstacles to doing consistent and persistent BVLOS flights for the near term. But right now, it is strictly limited for DOTs to IPP waivers.
I'll quickly address the thermal question. Under civil infrastructure inspection, one of the things we've recently been doing some testing on with thermal is doing bat studies for, there's certain endangered species that we want to be able to protect in our state, and so flying a drone and using a thermal camera under a bridge, you can count bats. Usually it's very dark under there, and one of the issues you have with flying a drone is the lighting under a bridge, and so using a thermal camera could help us address that. So that's one use. Another use is wetland mitigation, understanding where the moisture in the water is reflecting back, higher content versus where the soil is dry. So that could help us understand the boundaries of wetlands. We have a lot of wetlands in North Carolina. So those are two things right off the bat that I could throw out. But I know there's lots of great uses for thermal, especially within infrastructure inspection.
Okay, maybe a last question or two for our panels, and I do know that if you go to our website, the domestic scan, I don't have the number off the top of my head, that was for the use of UAS for surface transportation program. That New Jersey as well as Minnesota and Michigan all mentioned research or use of using drones, UAS, for bridge inspection. So there could be some best practices information from there that you would like to look into until we can do our own separate webinar on bridge inspection. So Basil, I think this question from Jeffrey Willis, you guys had some work that you did in traffic incident management.
Yes, so we did some studies last year with using drones to map a collision scene, and what we found was we could, using traditional means, ground-based LiDAR, it took around 2 hours to map a collision, and so we actually staged a collision. We didn't go out to a real accident scene, but we staged a collision, had the State Highway Patrol folks come out, use their traditional LiDAR unit, and it took just under 2 hours. And then we used drones. We flew and mapped it. We did actually we did 4 missions. We did 3 flights, and then one of the flights we noticed a smudge on the lens, so the pictures weren't turning out quite as well, and we did all of that in 15 minutes. So we, a typical flight was taking around 5 minutes. We did release a study articulating the cost savings, which I'll just need to see if I can bring up again, but we found the cost savings for a lane closure and what it cost the traveling public, and so we're able to come up with a cost savings based on an incident. And of course that's going to vary from where the incident is, but just think of your main corridor through your respective states or regions and what it would cost to have 4 lanes of traffic shut down for however many hours versus that being cut down to potentially 5 to 10 minutes or 30 minutes to be realistic. And then there's this savings of that's tough to put a cost on, which is it's less exposure to the emergency responders, less exposure to traffic. We know that unfortunately emergency responders are killed while responding to incidences by vehicles, and so there's that savings as well. And then there's the cost savings that was provided between the ground-based LiDAR unit and then the drone that we deployed. In the end, the Highway Patrol adopted this program. They now have around 25 drones, North Carolina State Highway Patrol. And so what they'll do is if there's a collision, they'll map it quickly with the drone, and then they'll pull the vehicles off the road and then and take them to a wrecking yard. And then at the wrecking yard, they'll scan them with the LiDAR unit, but that way they can open traffic up. And when they scan them with the LiDAR unit, they get a more accurate model of the amount the vehicle has crushed. And then you can figure out things like how much energy was transferred by how much the vehicle is crushed, and those are some of the key things that they need in reconstructing a collision.
Great, thanks. And thanks to Zach, who was one of our subject matter experts on the scans. So scan 1701, successful approaches for the use of unmanned aerial systems by surface transportation agencies. And we will also make sure that this link is put on, along with this, the link to this webinar recording. And Hoda did say that the FHWA is also investigating the feasibility of UAS and minimum requirements to complement bridge inspection. And so when we do our webinar in the future on specifically on bridge inspection, we will, of course, invite folks from the FHWA to participate and update you guys as well. So with that, I want to say thank you to the National Operations Center of Excellence for hosting this webinar for AASHTO, and to our three speakers, Brett, Bob, and Basil, for you guys, for your presentations, and for all the folks on the call to know that all the presentations and a recording of the webinar will be posted to our website. And with that, thank you very much, and look forward to our next webinar in the next couple of months.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great